Good morning, guys. This is IT Live, brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. I'm Tex Homer. That's Eric Nalin, and that's Coach Dub down below. We had a fun weekend. We had a fun week, actually, because we got spring ball back. That was big. We had a Saturday practice, and then also the recruits were up on the 40 acres, too. And that was we got a lot of intel from that. So we're going to talk the past week of spring ball. Eric wrote a nice piece setting the table for this upcoming second week where we're going to be in pads, which is important. We'll get a lot more information on the lines. And then, of course, we'll talk recruits as things heat up there. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Morning.
Good.
Happy Monday.
Yeah. Good morning, Roaster. All right. Eric, when you go from week one, you've covered this for years. How much value is there in the early stuff you hear, consistent early stuff you hear in week one to mattering in the season?
Well, it's more about the skill players for that first week. You can tell it's kind of like being able to notice things when you watch 7-on-7 or when you hear about 7-on-7. Not nearly as much about the run game, players in the box, whether that's offensive line, defensive line, linebackers coming downhill, safeties coming downhill. The physicality you're not going to learn nearly as much about. But we did hear that even during third tempo, the linebackers are gonna take their shots on the running backs when they can. We heard really good things about the freshman physicality. They seem to be up for it. We're going to learn a lot more about them this week. And there's still plenty to learn about the overall skill players. When you hear a guy that's fast and winning deep, it's not like he's going to slow down dramatically once the pads come on. That's kind of relevant for the information we've passed along on Parker Livingstone. But yeah, this week it's definitely a step up. The first week was great energy. Probably like we wrote either Friday or I don't know. They all run together. One of the updates talked about the energy. Like they just hit the ground running a lot faster than typical. It wasn't really an ease-in portion to it. I think that has to do with like the youth movement. There's a lot more younger guys vying for playing time. I think the new coaches also help on that too. You got a young guy in Mark Orfe at corner, and then you got a perpetually young guy in Dwayne Akina at safety, bringing quite a bit of energy. So. First week we can learn a lot, but not nearly as much as we're going to learn over the coming weeks.
Yeah. Something stuck out to me in the Instagram. You're like perusing every clip for like trying to mine information.
Yeah.
But all I got from they did a drill where they're tackling a dummy over a pad. But just how hard they were tackling said dummy was different than the pre-Sark area when I would see in practice. So like you're talking about just moving fast in week one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that that's going to result to the best tackling team in football. I'm just saying they were going hard in week one, and I noticed that. Coach,
Charlie learned something last spring. Players were surprised. Players were talking about Vernon Broughton, how hard he was hitting the bag.
Yep.
And Charlie shared that. And then, you go out the season and you can see Vernon Broughton's striking and hand placement. The NFL mock drafters and scouts are starting to pick up on his striking power. There's things you can learn from those drills. It's always interesting to see those.
Yeah, that was interesting. It was actually Bo Barnes and his dad. He said when he hit the sled, it sounded like a car crash. I was like, okay, Vernon, let's go.
Yeah.
But for the first week, you want to see what kids know, right? You got a script and you're going through it. Can they apply what they learned in the classroom to the field? And it's fast paced. So it's not like, okay, let me teach you step by step. Like, we got to go. Let's see what you know. So if the guys are moving around fast, it means they're cerebral, they're learning, and they're applying it to the field, which is really, really good to see in week one with such a lot of young guys.
Yeah, the young guys is the key there, right? Like, because I wasn't expecting them to be moving fast.
Yeah,
I thought it was basically going to be like a clinic for a bunch of freshmen.
Mm-hmm. No, they're telling them to go fast, get as many reps as possible, and we'll clean everything up in video review. That. So it's high energy. Just keep going. They're doing minor corrections here and there, but for the most part, they want to get from one drill to the next, and any mistakes they make, they can fix the next day in their classroom sessions.
Okay, cool. I like that motto. It's just we're in that different era, man. The players, like when they go out to the field, it's like what was Ian's analysis last year? The players are big and fast, and that's true. Yeah. Man. There's a different caliber of athlete that's moving around on the field under the Sark era, and that's been super cool. We're gonna pull up Eric's latest and dive through it. All right. So what do we hear in week one? Setting the table for week two. Arch, we're hearing like these are the notes of like a veteran quarterback, and so that's what's interesting. It's like, yeah, he's doing his job. There's like not a ton of like craziness to it. But the big thing I think that I keyed in on, because we were kind of emotionally preparing ourselves for Arch to sling around the field a la interceptions. But he's taking his checkdowns when that's the best option, presented. I also like hearing that he's not just taking his check downs because it's a safe thing. So it's like as long as he's progressing the whole way down to a check down, taking those, that's a sign of a maturing quarterback. So I'm glad to hear that he is taking care of the ball.
Yeah, protecting the ball, I was a bit surprised because you would think this is a time where he'd be a little bit more aggressive. There's still plenty of time for turnovers. Defense is going to dial up a lot of different looks. I'm sure they're pretty vanilla right now. But yeah, I'm most excited about the play action passing. That's kind of what I think sets the run game. Play action passing, I think, sets the ceiling for the floor for the season. I think the defense is going to set the floor for the season. So if they can start putting up a lot of points like Sarkisian was traditionally known for before he got to Texas, and he's done okay in that regard, but he hasn't really got to the point where they're blowing teams out consistently. I think there's a lot of inconsistency from one quarter to the next in offensive production. If they start hitting deep shots, I think it's not going to matter if you have that a little bit of inconsistency here or there. So that's what I'm hoping to hear, that continuation. That's what we've heard the goal was, to get back to run the ball, play action, pass over the top. So far, so good on that front.
Pro style.
I love that. I love to hear that. It's so hard when you got defense have to play honest. If they're running, and it looks the same with the same play fakes, right? And I know Arch is going to sell it just like his uncle used to. Peyton got so many people with there's outside zone run stretches, and then hit Dallas Clark or somebody else. I can't wait to see this actually. 11 on 11 pads. Going 11 on 11 in full pads, but man, to hear it early on is really, really great.
Man, I forgot about Peyton Manning on play action. It didn't matter. Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne. Geez, it seemed like they were always wide open, 3 steps beyond the safety. And it was, when they called it up right, it had like a 90% chance of hitting big.
What's the HBO show that covers the NFL teams in the preseason?
Hard Knocks.
Yeah, Hard Knocks.
Yeah, when I watched the Hard Knocks of the Jets, and it was Zach Smith and Aaron Rodgers like trying to test each other if they could tell if their play fake was going to be a play fake or not. And then you don't realize how much time quarterbacks put into trying to make it all look exactly the same. Yeah. It was interesting. What's up, Coach? All right. What you guys were saying. So play action, if Arch can hit a play action bomb and you're worried about him running and he can do the RPO game, I mean, I really don't know how you defensively play that. And of course, we're dealing with the ideal Arch Manning right now, right? He hasn't had a snap, so we've got the godly version of Arch Manning. But theoretically, man, that's a pain. What is also interesting is we're hearing good things about KJ Lacey early in the first few practices.
Yeah, I heard good things in the lead up, honestly, in offseason. Doing some 7-on. They had a few 7-on-7 sessions where the arm was checking out. Obviously, he has the maturity of a quarterback that you expect, sort of the leadership intangibles. And then, our inside info points to them being able to run. It's, they won't change the offense much eventually. Of course, we're talking about the ideal KJ Lacey here too. They won't change up the offense much from what Arch does and what Lacey does, despite them being entirely different in a physical sense. They're similar in what they can accomplish within the offense. So he's a guy that they'd want to get on the move, bootleg, that sort of thing. Let him run it. He's going to run it when he needs to. He's more athletic than his profile, his recruiting profile would have you believe. He's a lot like Bryce Young. Now, can he do the buy your time for 5 minutes back there like Bryce Young did? That's basically how they beat Texas in 2022. That remains to be seen. But he's off to a good start. And I mentioned, Trey Owens. We talked about Trey Owens last spring. He was new. We're talking about Lacey a lot because we're still getting to know him right now. He is new. And, of course, we're going to talk about Arch Manning, because he's Arch Manning, but also he's going to start. And we're still, he's not a very experienced starter. So there's a lot to cover with both of those two. Trey Owens we'll ask more about this week. We know he's got the big arm, tough kid. Also has some good intangibles. Still learning the playbook from what we learn as far as getting through his progressions quickly.
Running back. Crucial position for me. Normally, I'm not like – running back is almost like a minimum threshold. If you can meet the minimum threshold, then it's not crazy impactful. But if you don't meet the minimum threshold, then it's a huge problem. So that's why we need to see with running back, can we hit this minimum threshold and then ideally be a real problem, especially if – we're going with a play action pro style offense, right? We want to make that as potent as possible. So running back, something we've keyed in on all off season. So first things first, we haven't done pads, right, Eric? So we don't know a ton, but what have you heard early on?
Yeah, I mean, everybody looks good. It's again, it's not in pads. You're not seeing people, got to break tackles. The special running backs either make people miss or break tackles, and the really special ones make them do both. We need winning practices under pads, scrimmage, duress, all that stuff. We know we get with Trey Wisner. We've been covering how the expectations for a big bounce from Jarrett Gibson in his second year. I was excited to hear that Ricky Stewart and James Simon were running it well. Both those guys look good. They certainly belong at Texas. Now, are they special? I don't know. Christian Clark running well. Obviously, he's not going to be – we're not going to learn nearly as much about him in the spring as we will in August because he's not going to be participating in any of the contact periods.
Coach, how you feeling about running back room?
We're about to find out. Pads, come on. I see how you look at inside run, man. 9 versus 7. Like, this is the time you'll find out about your running backs. Can they bounce off, break tackles, run through contact, right? I'm sure they'll keep maybe a light whistle, maybe. But I'm sure they're going to let them hit a little bit, but we'll see. We'll find out a lot this week about that, though.
This running back room is going to get what it's blocked for. Will they be able to get more than it's blocked for is the question. Now, they feel, again, they're changing up the run game. We've talked about one of the biggest change might not even be personnel-wise. It might be schematic. They run more gap schemes and stuff. I think that gap schemes will give the running backs more assertiveness. I think it'll give the offensive line more assertiveness too. So we could see the full picture come together in ways we're not even sure about yet.
Yeah, gap schemes are definitely more concrete, and everybody can block down. You're pulling. Zone is, if you can execute zone, it's really beautiful. But zone is a lot of like that linebacker move. There's a lot more pointing that occurs, and it makes you a tad more tentative.
The choreography and timing, everybody being on the same page is more important. I cannot stand that I did not capitalize that header or make that header the same size as the other ones. It's
the little things. Yeah, it's
going to get pointed out. I've got to be more detail oriented. That's going to get pointed out in the comments for sure. I was going to subscribe, but then I saw that.
This guy had an H3. It should have been an H1. All right, I am excited about Christian Clark. I am excited to see how he progresses. Wide receiver. This has been the big one. We already hit on it earlier. Parker Livingstone's getting mentioned by everyone, it seems. And this is my reservation first. I love to hear that. Downfield. Does this matter if we're taking a wide receiver in the portal? I mean, is this going to end up all being for naught? Like, how does this work?
Well, I think it definitely matters because we're covering a program on a longer trajectory than just 1 year.
Right.
So one of my favorite commenters on IT with a pretty funny name, Dick Fingers. He keeps comping him to Jordy Nelson. If you look at Jordy Nelson career buildup, it was like 25 catches, 40 catches, and then 122 catches. So we know Parker Livingstone is going to be a good college football player. We don't know exactly how it's all going to play out over his career. So it's. We've got but the early signs are there. We're starting to talk about him a whole lot more than we did last year. It's really his time to step up, and you always need depth. Let's say they bring in a transfer, the transfer gets hurt. You'll be a lot happier having Parker Livingstone there. Or let's say something happens with Ryan Wingo, God forbid. Parker Livingstone would be the guy that fills in over there, probably more so than one of the true freshmen. So, yes, we want to hear this as much as possible. We want to hear it continue, and we want as many wide receivers in that room as possible.
Yeah. Ryan, what do you think, Coach? When you hear
I'm set on IT boards. They were Bostock and Parker Livingstone, man. Recruits were on campus seeing practice. Demarion Mays, a 28 kid, was there. He said, "Man, Parker Livingstone just looks smooth. Like he does the small things right. Attention to detail. Like he catches the ball, he wants to go score, run an extra 30 yards. Like most people don't do that. He practices like a pro." And so the good things you hear, because he's putting in the work behind the scenes, and it's really coming onto practice field now. So you better buy stock now because I think he's going to be a baller.
Blake Bryant asks, did I read he's playing the slot a lot, or did I just imagine that? I think you imagined that. He has played in the slot a little bit, not a lot. DeAndre Moore and Michael Terry are in the slot currently. And honestly, that's DeAndre Moore's position. But again, Parker Livingstone might just be the third or fourth receiver. Who knows? Jamie French is also vying for that. We're hearing some decent things there. But Parker play all three positions, and it sounds like he can. He's beating good cornerbacks over the top. The corners are going to have to adjust the way they play Parker, and then that's going to allow him to be a little bit more aggressive at snapping his routes off and creating space. So yeah, he's got some good things going on. Parker's going to be a player. It's just a matter of, is it this season and to what degree? He could go out and have a 50 catch season, and it would not surprise me.
Anytime I like to hear you got a deep ball throwing quarterback, you got a deep ball receiver, and they live together. So
Yeah.
solid.
Well, I mean, Manning does have a lot of roommates, but Parker is certainly one of them.
Yeah. Oh, is he at a frat? How do you mean he has a lot of roommates?
Dude, they live in these big ass buildings, and
Oh, they do
there's
that.
3 floors to 'em. There's like 3 floors. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I didn't know if we're in the NIL age where it's just everyone shares a mansion now. All right, Ryan Wingo. Eric said he's Michael Jordan. That was so weird that he did that. But let's give some context here. So Eric's saying that Wingo, we haven't heard like a ton about him, but that's because his base effort is already top line. There's not a lot to talk about there. So explain that, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, there's guys like Wingo, Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons. We know that those guys are awesome. And now, maybe not everybody knows it because they just go by Wingo's stat line, but everybody knows Ryan Wingo's a force and awesome. I don't really talk about those guys as much because I'm trying to, I feel like they're a known commodity. I'm trying to learn about everybody else. So, Wingo just went about his business, had a good week. They're getting him involved in more of the gadget stuff, more of the things that are designed to make sure he touches the ball, which we probably should have seen a lot more of last week. That was a critique from a number of us. Wingo's going to be the man. It's just, I don't think they feel really good with where he is. And, I haven't really asked a whole lot about him. He's in a good spot.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a good player.
Yeah, definitely.
Burnt Orange Horn proclaims no wide receiver will be taken unless an exceptional one is available. The same goes for running back.
I love it when they're so definitive, man.
I know, Eric. This is your source.
Can
I subscribe to your page?
I was going to say.
But I mean, yeah, they're going to take a wide receiver, and obviously
he might be technically correct because we're probably going to get when we bring people in, they're probably going to be exceptional. So I think he's technically correct here.
Yeah, it's just we don't know how the spring depth, all that. How do they feel about the freshmen is a consideration too. It's not just the top line. You got to feel good about the depth. Last year, if Isaiah Bond didn't hit like they wanted, if Ryan Wingo wasn't ready to go at least play, and Wingo wasn't quite nearly as ready as he's going to be this year. You have to have depth. They went to Ryan Wingo because Bond wasn't getting it done as a blocker. You still have to hedge against these big guys not hitting. Bond did not hit to the degree that they thought they would. That was Matthew Golden. If you bring in a guy it's not even certain that the stud is a stud. But the guy that's most likely is good and would start. But Parker Livingstone's still going to play a lot, and you still want to develop all your depth because you never know at what point you're going to need him. Look at running back last season as an example.
Slot's also very interesting. Of course, we have DeAndre Moore, who will be our starter, but he's not playing currently. So we've had Dalen McCutcheon, who we've heard great things about, and then Michael Terry is now getting reps in the slot versus outside. So what's going on at the slot position? Developing some real depth there, I guess.
Yeah, Dalen's kind of as far as freshmen go, Dalen is a bit of a known because he's so polished. We've heard a lot of good things about him already. He could play this year. Dalen McCutcheon could play this year. I feel confident about that. Michael Terry, I think they're just getting him used to being a flex weapon. Whether you want to call that a tight end or a wide receiver, maybe little Jordan Humphrey, but with a little more blocking duties is probably where he's destined to end up. But we still need to figure out where his frame is going to take him. What's he going to weigh? Probably going to weigh 230, 235 at some point. He's a bigger kid. But yeah, anybody that had expectations for him are simply, they're not looking at the depth chart and they're only looking at his rating. It's a tough path for him to play a lot this season. Unless he just is too good with the ball in his hands and they give him some wildcat looks or some immediate screens, that sort of thing. But he's not going to be out there routing people up. He's not going to be a vertical slot. So I think expectations should be tempered for Michael Terry right now for the immediate, but that's not to say anything about what he could be long-term.
That makes sense.
Yeah. All right, guys, before we keep going, let's hear from Academy Sports and Outdoors.
Days like this, the anticipation's half the fun. The call to adventure. Possibilities in every direction. Look at that. The stories you'll bring back. Even the true ones. And already, you can't wait until next time. From first catch to biggest catch of the season, this is where it starts. Academy Sports and Outdoors. Have fun out there.
All right. Before we move on to tight end, how do we feel about Owens being a play away?
I don't feel good about anybody. I mean, it wouldn't matter who the backup is. I mean, if you lose Arch Manning, it's going to be a drop off.
Exactly.
So I don't feel good about it being Trey or KJ, or if they had a transfer, that guy wouldn't give a whole lot of confidence either. The number one thing is that's where the run game really comes important. They've got to have that run game that they can rely on for if they do have to go that route. Then you're going to probably see more run and play action to an even higher degree and less of the RPO game, because they're still going to want to take their shots with Trey and take advantage of his big arm. But yeah, I wouldn't feel great about anybody playing against Arch. Now, Texas could still beat, Vanderbilt. It's going to be a little bit tougher. Texas can still beat Mississippi State with the backup. I'm not too worried about that. How long is Arch out for? Who are they playing? Then, all that factors into how I feel about the backup.
Knock some wood for that one.
Do you think we turn loose a few guys to make some room for targets we may go after in the spring portal? We sit at 81 of 85 spots.
Yeah, I think it is 81. I've heard a couple names of guys that are probably not going to make it after the spring. It's the spring portal. We're going to know because the spring portal opens up on the 15th, right? And it closes on the it's 15th to the 25th, I think. Yeah. Texas spring isn't over until the 26th. So that tells you they're not looking to lose a whole lot. Could it happen? There's a couple names that we have on watch, but, they're in the middle of spring ball right now. So I don't know. They're definitely looking for impact guys if they can get it. And there is a little bit more room than I think people realize. That they have to massage a number here or there, they'll do it to improve the roster. I think they could take a little bit more. Somebody asked for an over-under on 5.5. I would probably put it at 4 would be the addition, and so that would put them at 85, I guess.
Yeah, how does that work if spring ball's not even over by the time the portal? Is that like strategic? Like you're like, hey, how does that work?
That's definitely strategic as far as keeping guys. Remember, they just had a tough go of it after the 5-day window after the Ohio State game.
Yeah.
Now, because of that tough go, and it was very tough, they that got the dangerous period behind them. That was where they locked up the guys that I would compare to Michael Jordan. As far as the guys we're not checking on every single practice because they're already known commodities. Yeah. This portal window is definitely. It's going to be more aggressive about adding rather than retaining. So I haven't, they're not going to lose anybody of significance to the roster. That was, there's about 5 or 6 guys that they had to keep wrangled in. Now, if they lose somebody, it's a guy that wasn't going to start.
Yeah. I still can't believe how stressful that period has got to be, dude.
That was a wild week, man. That was not fun. I thought that was one of those weeks where you're like, all right, yeah, Sark probably is going to go to the NFL if he doesn't.
Right.
Yes, get this.
Yeah, dude, it's brutal, man. All right, tight end. So we saw that when I got practice clips from the only availability we've had, and I can verify this visually. Jeff Banks is coaching up Jordan Washington on his blocking drills. And, sometimes it's like you mess up a block and you go to the back and you have to wait again. It's like if Jordan messed up a block, he had to go reset.
Repeat.
Right. Yeah. And so Jeff Banks is going hard on Washington, and that's what you want to see because that's actually the sign that they think Washington's the guy, right? They're trying to get him up to speed very quickly there. Anything else on top of that, Eric?
No, not really. Just trying to expedite the process. Here's another position they'll go to the portal. I think here's a good example for us to market the reason. And I don't care if it's inside Texas or one of our main competitors. It's going to be a better option than going to the national guys because Sports Illustrated ESPN had Spencer Shannon as their breakout candidate for the offense for the team. It was like, well, that's mind blowing based on what we're hearing. Yeah. It's Jordan Washington. Maybe Spencer Shannon if he gets to blocking better, but they're going to have to go portal. Washington, massive ceiling for him. It's just a matter of when. And he's at 250. If you see that listing at 268, just discard that. Ball it up, throw it into that basketball hoop you have hanging over your garbage can. That's not anywhere close.
Cool. Do you have any intel on what we're trying to get tight end wise? Because I want a blocker. Like
Yeah,
I
an
want
experienced guy that can do it all. Really, a guy that can do it all. He has to be
yeah, of
incredible
course I'll
blocker.
take that.
This offense looks a lot different with just a credible blocker, a credible receiver. Because it's kind of like the same as using Arch's legs 4 times a game. You throw that tight end 3 or 4 times, and it changes everything.
It does.
But I want some dumb 9th-year senior from directional state that has like emotional problems.
Just wants to hit, right?
Yeah.
Put your head down and hit.
I want that kid at Stanford. Stanford's portal window open, right?
Yeah.
Because the coach got fired.
Yep, he did. Mm-hmm.
What's his name? Roush. That's the guy I want. 30 catches, 400 yards, whatever he had. Stanford brain, mature. I'd be all over him if I was Texas.
Yeah, that'd be cool. So, but tight end to me, it's running back and tight end are crucial positions, either in the portal or developmentally.
Development, yeah.
All right, now we're on offensive and defensive line, which is awesome because we're going to have padded practices. So now we actually get to hear. But also, Eric, what's the number one caveat of covering the lines in the offseason?
Well, I can see that I forgot to capitalize the linebacker again too, like wide receiver. So I grouped these guys together because they were not in pads this past week, and everyone's like, "Yeah, they're just kind of pushing on each other, and it's physical right up, as when they first snap off the line off the snap." But they're not. It's not football. They're not playing football, so we need to learn a lot more about them. There's still encouraging things, like if you've seen pictures of DJ Campbell, he looks the best he's ever looked. Internally, he's taking on more of a leadership role. They feel good about Cole Hudson. They feel he's the most underrated guy on the line. Trevor Gooseby, they feel like there's not going to be much drop-off between Kelvin Banks and him, which is remarkable to say. But, based on what we've seen with Gooseby, that's not surprising. The positions to watch on our line are left guard and right tackle, right? That's I think they're going to get a portal offensive lineman, to be honest.
Do you think that'll likely be a tackle or an interior guy?
Best guy available. I mean, I could see them taking 2.
Okay. All right. So it's also going to be zero sum. So there's that.
Zero sum. There's the caveat for sure. And that one, it applies more this year than it has in the past. We knew the O-line was decent last year. We knew the D-line was decent last year. So it would give you a true read on how they were playing. Here, we're still not sure because you got so many new transfers. You got a new guy playing center. You got a new left guard. A new right tackle. So zero sum is going to definitely muddy the waters on our read on here. So we're going to have to ask really smart questions to get really sound information on O-line, D-line.
Yeah, DJ Campbell too. I think they put a video or something out on social media, him like rallying the troops. And I thought that was interesting. Like you said, DJ Campbell stepping up in the leadership position. Coach, what's the key here? What are you listening for? Like Eric said, he's going to have to ask smart questions. What are the buzzwords here that we're in trouble or we're right on track?
I don't know who's going to have a fight this week. Pads come on in the trenches. I want to see that. I want to see who really gets nasty and gets testy in the trenches. Because you'll be able to tell a lot about your offensive line or defense line when the pads come on. I think, everybody talks a lot when you got the little soft shoulder pads on and you're jockeying for position. But the pads come on this week. Who's really getting out there? Are we resetting the line of scrimmage? The defensive line getting off blocks and dominating and disrupting the offensive flow, right? And so we'll see a lot this week. But I just want to hear how consistent maybe the running game is, right? Short yardage situations, inside run, how we look in the open field. It's easy to have a motor when you don't have pads on, right? But are you chasing down guys when you got the pads on? So I want to continue to hear and see these type of things for the defensive line going forward.
Yeah, I did like hearing Travis Shaw running around. I don't think I wrote it here, but I wrote it the other day. Travis Shaw running around in pursuit like Vernon Broughton. Now, I have a great visual of Vernon Broughton in pursuit, and it played out on the field for Vernon. Vernon was always running to the ball. That was a bit surprising to hear about Shaw. That was, I'll take it. And then we also said about Hero Kanu, seems like a Texas guy, culture fit, which, as I wrote in the article, that's great because they have him for 2 years. You didn't want to hear of him being a bad apple or a misfit for Texas. So that's encouraging.
And Colin Simmons has been limited, but whatever the reason is, it is minor.
Non-issue, but yeah, people, if they ask about Colin, there's not really much to say about him right now.
Cool.
Quiet 28.
we got a lot of Jordans, dude.
See,
Yeah. Linebacker, we got another Jordan here as well. So not a ton of asking about Anthony Hill. We know Anthony Hill will be going to the NFL next year. Kind of know what we got there, so don't need a ton of intel. What's most interesting is the will position, Eric. What's going on there?
Yeah, you got sort of disparate strengths between Leonga Lafau and Trey Moore, although they do have some overlapping ability as well. You know, Leonga is probably the best linebacker in coverage. It's either him or Ty Anthony. And then, but he's also good at reading flow and coming downhill, doing the traditional linebacker things. And then you got Trey Moore, who, they feel like they can do anything with. He's a schematic weapon. You can game plan him differently. You can hunt mismatches. Different ways to blitz from linebacker. So I think I think the way that they play or how often they play is going to be game plan dependent, schematic dependent, opponent dependent. They're both going to play a ton. Probably both going to play a ton within the same game. They like what they have going on there. Somebody said of Trey Moore, he's kind of like the Jahdae Barron at linebacker in that they can line him up wherever and he's going to get the job done.
Cool. That's important. What about depth?
Ty Anthony, they've got to figure out a way to get him on the field because he's ready for snaps.
Yeah.
So I haven't heard on Brad Spence. Obviously, he's going to back up Anthony Hill. Big kid, very big kid, thick and kind of a thicker build. He had his heart set on playing edge when he got to college, like he played in high school. He's a very solidly built guy, but still moves fluid. It's not like bringing in Kendrick Blackshire. Spence is going to play this season. They're good at linebacker. It's just it's not deep, but there's just zero dead weight. And you got Bo Barnes still learning the playbook. You can expect that. Linebacker is a very tough position to come in and make an impact early. Anthony Hill, was fortunate that he was able to get his feet wet coming off the edge in a much more narrow, defined role. Barnes' head swimming a little bit, but he'll be all right.
Yeah, Barnes' mental jump from junior to senior year shows a kid that can figure that out.
Yeah.
Is Cunningham running with the DBs to start his career? Is that a function of weight at this point?
Yeah, that's Jonathan Cunningham, true freshman, North Crowley. He's at Star. I think that they're doing that. He's like 195 pounds, which that's not the greatest concern of all time. If Maurice Blackwell can get up to linebacker size, anybody can. Maurice Blackwell was extremely lean. He was like 185 pounds when he got to Texas. Mm-hmm. Cunningham's a much bigger guy. Not a concern. I think what they're doing here is just teaching him how to cover. He's going to have some of the same coverage concepts at linebacker that he'll have at Star. And I think if they want to eventually get bigger at the position, depending on mismatches or matchups, two tight ends, let's say they play a team with two tight ends. Jelani McDonald is unavailable to play Star because he's needed at safety for whatever reason. Maybe he's a guy that can end up doing that. They're looking for as many different types of bodies and skill sets as possible. I mean, you couldn't get more different as players from Grayson Littleton on the coverage end of the spectrum to Jonathan Cunningham more on the bigger point of attack end of the spectrum.
Yeah, nickel is weird because it's so, like you said, there's so many body types there, which hints that, this is going to be a highly matchup-based defense. Because these body types, so they're gonna get, and they're also talking about Trey Moore versus Leonga. Seems like they're really going to game plan offenses this year, even more so.
That sticks with what Ian Boyd's been talking about since Johnny Nansen was hired. He would have very game plan specific, game plans to be redundant. He would go in and do one thing one week and something entirely different the next, just kind of depending on what the offense is doing. It seems like they're getting to that point. We're going to see more dime. And I think that's another function of getting these guys with a bit different body types on. Because if you're going to go to a sixth defensive back, do you want to be a pure cover guy like a Littleton or even Wardell Mack is more of a corner, or do you want to be bigger there with Jelani potentially? Michael Taft could play there. There's a lot of different things. Star is going to be it's going to be tough to keep track of what this defense is doing week to week. But I think the Star is going to be one of those tells that kind of hints at what their plans are for the upcoming opponent.
Yeah, whoever around the program during in season, you're going to be like, who's at Star this week? Who's at Star this week? And then we'll know we'll know the defensive. We'll know the defensive.
But I think Wardell is a good all around guy that you could play him against pretty much anybody and be okay. Kind of like Barron, Gilbo. Mack makes a lot of sense there. He's not as big as he's listed. If he was at 212 and still covering like that, that might just be, you would never probably take him off the field.
I was gonna say that's NFL.
Yeah, exactly.
That's and then Jelani, we earlier heard that he might be at star, but with Derek Williams' absence at safety, Jelani's just been back in the third level, right?
Yeah, I think it has as much. I'm not sure Jelani wants to play start, and I don't really blame him. Hopefully Wardell doesn't.
I don't blame him either. I don't want him at star.
Yeah, you're talking about. It's a tough position. Look at Makuba going from star to safety from Clemson to Texas. Look at Barron going from star to corner.
Yeah,
it's mentally taxing, processing the box and also the passing game. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I still think if you play an offense that's running 2 tight ends, you'll probably see Jelani there still. That's what he did last year, even as early as the Michigan game. But yeah, I think we're going to see McDonald at safety, and it's going to rotate Taft, Williams, McDonald, and right now I might have to put my money on Jordan Johnson-Rebel. But Xavier Filsame's playing. We could talk about that.
That's good to hear.
Well, the NFL struggles to evaluate star really effectively, and they also take it as like they're the 5th best DB when that's not necessarily true. They're generally the best star to fit. So I see it, and I also want Jelani McDonald to be able to come down from a perch and smack dudes. So I like him better at safety too, but we'll see. All right, we'll talk corner, then we'll go safety. How about that?
Yeah, you talk about zero sum. If Parker Livingstone's going off, I can't sit here and tell you, the corner's a lockdown. Yeah. So we haven't heard much about the frontline starters other than Gilbo's getting coached up really hard. He's going from, while it's easier to go from star to corner, he still has to brush up on his pure man coverage principles, his zone coverage principles. It's a bit of a work in progress getting reoriented to corner. He hasn't really played corner all that much at Texas outside of maybe his first couple of weeks on campus. So he's getting reoriented to the position. Haven't heard much about Manny Muhammad. I'll ask more this week. Santana Wilson is probably the cornerback I've heard the most about. I think he's had a pick in each practice. So that's encouraging for him. Mm-hmm. And I've heard a lot of good things about Cade Phillips. Now, in the most recent update, I didn't hear anything, but hearing that Cade Phillips has really good footwork and technique, that leads me to believe he's going to be a star. Not a star on the field. A star on the field, but not at the position of star. That makes me extremely encouraged for him because we know he has the length and the speed and that sort of stuff. So if the footwork and technique are there, that foreshadows him having a great career.
I love to hear that. Case, my guy. He's the guy in this class I love, man. I think he's going to be an absolute stud. You put it all together, sky's the limit.
Yeah. It's just a bummer, man. I'm going to miss Barron. It's just knowing you got a Thorpe corner, you're just like, man, it's coming. It can't be.
All the guys they lost, he's the toughest to replace because he's such an all-around football player. And the mindset, the leadership.
He's going to go down as one of my favorites ever, man. Yeah, just the intelligence, the leadership, the positional versatility. I mean, those are he's just a rare human being, not even a rare football player.
Correct. That Centex triumvirate of Barron, Makuba. It's too bad that Tom Herman had messed up that Makuba recruitment because, man, you got Taft, Barron, Makuba all knowing each other for a very long time, playing together. That was really storybook.
Yeah, that was cool. All right, safety. Speaking of Taft, we see him as a leader. I think today they put out material of Akina standing next to Taft. And, Taft is the unquestioned quarterback of the secondary and probably the whole defense.
Yeah, Taft doing Michael Taft things. The Tony Kukoc proviso. He's going to get his he's going to get his 3-pointers in. No, he's doing the Michael Taft thing. Coach, he's probably the quarterback of the defense, not just the secondary. Excellent guy to have back there with some younger safeties still learning the ropes. Jelani McDonald, everybody calls him just Lonnie. He's doing great. Jordan Johnson-Rebel, solid player. One of those guys that probably is going to shine a little bit more when the pads come on because he's got a physical nature at the position. Xavier Filsame playing more confident, more physical than the year before. Sometimes confidence and physicality are intertwined. Your strength and conditioning probably did him wonders, but I think just the assertiveness of having a better command of the position. He came to safety late. I think that's doing wonders for him. And Zelisix, he gets mentioned. He's been mentioned a couple times. The true freshman who reclassified, already 6'2", 185, 190 pounds, mentally mature. I liken him to Lewis Cine at Georgia. I don't know if he moves quite like Lewis Cine, but I think there's some similarities there. Bright future. And then Jonah Williams off playing baseball. So as Coach Top says, first he says he sees Gilbo on the sidelines. I don't know. What else are you seeing if you're at practice, buddy? I need share the details. But Coach Top also says safety may be deeper than any fan thought, and I kind of feel pretty good about that.
So this is interesting. Jordan Johnson-Rubel, we've heard originally that he's a smart player. Then we heard that he's close to that 22 miles per hour, so he's a fast player. And then Eric just says he'll probably shine more with pads, so he likes to hit. So we have a smart, fast, aggressive safety. Is Jordan Johnson-Rubel, he's going to be our next year starter type of thing? Because to me, that seems like that's a bright future type of player.
Yeah, he makes a lot of sense as the replacement for Taft, kind of the eventual quarterback. Now, he's got some guys ahead of him on that as far as experience. Derek Williams returning. By that time, Jelani McDonald will be what we would consider a fully experienced player.
Williams.
Yeah. But, I can see Jordan being the guy that's kind of quarterbacking guys like Phil Sami, Jonah. Zealous kind of has a little bit all of that, Jordan too. But yeah, he's a complete football player. He punches above his recruiting weight because he does have that composite stuff that's not quite always appreciated by fans. He could play. He's versatile. Could also play. Could play star depending. That's kind of matchup dependent. You wouldn't want to match up one-on-one with a guy like Marvin Mims. But if a team wants to run at you a lot and you want a little bit more strength, you can definitely put him out there.
We never miss this question. Are we going to play freaking man coverage this year? Sark promises that we will every summer before fall camp. Fans love man coverage.
They do.
They love it.
I kind of like having the best secondary in college football. I'm a bigger fan of that. So I'm wondering what Mr. Roberts thinks they would have been had they run more man, like the greatest secondary of all time. I mean, it was already historically one of the best secondaries Texas has ever had. I'm not sure they should change up a whole lot, to be honest with you, other than taking advantage of the skill sets that the new personnel provide. You're going to see more dime coverage, which I think is what you should hope to see, given the amount of defensive backs.
Well, in zone 2, remember, that helps guys get picks easier as well. So
it does.
Man is cool, and for the masculine ego of playing man feels real good, but. Zone gets you some picks, man.
There's probably going to be times that they're going to want to mix and match it in a little bit more than last year, just because the pass rush is more likely to get there faster. I can see them wanting to run man, like that, but I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't change up a whole lot.
Hey, Homer, we need to bring back teach tape, man. We know zone turns into man essentially. So at the end of the day, they still have man coverage principles in a lot of the coverages.
Yeah. And like Holly's saying here, we frequently mix coverages. Yeah, you'll have one guy in man, the other guy in zone, split coverages one side of the field.
Yeah.
We got cooked in the playoffs. Huh? What? They shut down the greatest freshman wide receiver of all time.
Wow.
Cooked in the playoffs and got lucky. Half the quarterbacks last year were hurt at freshmen. I mean, they did play some crappy quarterbacks.
Yeah, we did play some awful quarterbacks. You're right there. But
so you're all right. 50-50 still a failing comment.
But yeah,
I'm just kidding, Damon.
And then also, there's no guarantee that playing man solves that problem, And so it's just like we'll have to see. All right, Scataboo RB pass, give me flashbacks, dude.
Yeah, come on.
All right. All right, guys, before we keep going, let's hear a word from Andre the Lawyer.
This video is brought to you by Andre the Lawyer. If you're injured, trust the team that secured millions for their clients and helped thousands of Texans with their injury case. Car wrecks, slip and falls, 18-wheeler accidents, on-the-job injuries, and wrongful deaths. Don't let insurance tell you what your claim is worth. Hire Andre the Lawyer to fight for you. Principal office is in Dallas, but they serve Texans throughout the state. So don't wait and call Andre the Lawyer today at 214-444-8808. That's 214-444-8808. The contact information is in the description.
Oh, thank you, Elsie. Thank you. All right, special teams. We have not heard much.
We have finite time with getting people on the phone. We're lucky to have the sources we do. It takes a lot of work to get them. I'm just not going to devote a whole lot of time to special teams at this point in the year. I don't know what Bert Auburn's going to do in front of 100,000 fans in Columbus, Ohio. Whatever he does in practice is not going to indicate what he's going to do in that situation. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Niblett, well, that makes the most sense, obviously. Him and Warren Roberson are both gunners. I even heard Ryan Wingo got some snaps at that, which is terrifying. But, no, yeah, Niblett, Warren Roberson are your gunners. Punt returners could be Aaron Butler, maybe Dalen McCutcheon, maybe even Jamie French. Kick returners probably going to be DeAndre Moore, Trey Wisner. I would like to see Niblett at kick returner too. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Everybody cares about kicking, and I get it. I care about kicking. It cost Texas a SEC championship in the first year. That sure would have been fun to cover. But I have no idea what Bert Auburn's going to do in front of fans in a pressure situation, and nobody does. Sark doesn't know. Sark must have confidence though, because they didn't bring in a portal kicker at least yet.
But also, Bert, that's what the weirdest part with Bert was that wasn't a problem the year prior.
Right.
No, it's like relievers, or it's like putting in golf. It comes and goes. Relievers in baseball. You've got Hall of Fame relievers, I think, outside of Mariano Rivera. They've all had bad years or years that were uncharacteristically poor. You've got guys that go on runs where they can't hit a 3-footer, and then you got other times when that same golfer can't miss a 10-footer, it seems like. So it's mental, and that's an impossible thing for anybody to read. The hardest parts about sports and evaluating people are the mental aspects. And, that's why the NFL burns money left and right on bad draft picks, because the mental side is so important. It's even harder on something like kicking. So I don't know, man. I'll be on pins and needles with the rest of you when that first situation arises with Bert Auburn, no matter what he's done up to that point.
Dude, kickers are such a weird mental eval. You need them like Cameron Dicker, like where it's like they almost don't even realize they're in a stadium. you know, like they're just like so like positively disengaged from what's occurring, But it's such a weird position, man. But you also say that Banks is very, very intense. I agree with you on that when it comes to getting special teams right. So Banks was not happy with the special teams overall, so that'll be an emphasis.
It should be improved. You've got some really good experience coming back that they learned some. They had to learn on the fly a little bit. They had to replace a lot. Not only did they have to replace some guys that went to the NFL, they had to replace guys like Trey Wisner and Michael Taft, who weren't out there nearly as much due to their expanded role on traditional downs and snaps. So they had to replace a lot. I think there's going to be no excuse for it this year, which means they're just going to get it right. It's going to be a lot better.
Plus, he has an extra pair of eyes in each room, special teams analyst and a tight ends analyst, right? Who can really kind of help and give some time so he can focus on special teams. So I think that's going to be a huge payoff as well.
Yeah, bringing a McKendo is going to, you bring in a tight end coach and it helps special teams. You think, well, that's not likely. Well, that's part of the purpose of it, the value proposition of bringing in somebody to take some of the load off of Jeff Banks at tight end is so he can focus more on special teams.
Yeah. Saw McKendo doing pictures of the recruiting event. This is called a segue, fellas. On the 40 acres we had this weekend. Charlie, who are the biggest names that came in? What did we learn? Who do we make progress with? How are the food trucks? All the important.
I say this set the foundation in last year's class because kids got to come and see the team actually practice and see who they'll be, who's going to be coaching me up, how I'm going to be developed when I get here, right? But you had Mark Bowman, pretty much, I feel like, number one tight end in the country. You had Richard Wesley, who just reclassified in 2026, could be the number one defensive end edge out of California, too. So just the feedback I got from kids, man, they love the intensity of practice, right? Just being around the guys, watching their position room. I know talking to Mark Bowman, he said that's one thing he wanted to see. Who the guys I'm going to be competing against once I get on, if I come to Texas, if I get on campus, right? How Jeff Banks coaches, seeing the scheme from a foundational install standpoint. How do they go about this, right? You want to see how Gunnar Helm got his numbers, right? Because that's interesting to him. And so it was another huge weekend, these guys getting to see practice. I think it sets the foundation in their recruiting because it's invaluable. You cannot account for this type of experience as a kid, as a recruit. Like, you can sell me on everything, but when you're coaching, you don't really have time to recruit me and sell me on anything good. You can see me in action as a coach. Chad Scott been a new coach, right? Running backs coach. Xavier Correll was there. He got to see how Chad Scott actually coaches and develops his guys and running back. What is he teaching them? Is it going to apply? Does it fit me? Same thing for receivers. I know it's a young guy, Demarion Mays, but seeing Coach Chris Jackson in action, he was like, man, those dudes get after it, the intensity of practice. Seeing Park Livingstone, seeing Jamie French, a young guy, Dalen McCutcheon do things like, these guys are already acting like veterans and pros already. Okay, so if I came here and I got a long way to go, I know I'm going to be developed when I get here, right? And so seeing that and hearing that kind of feedback from kids is huge. And so I think as we go on through spring practice, the more kids that come in, I think we got Felix Ojo, maybe #1 Talcum Nation coming on April 4th. He'll get a chance to see Coach Kyle Flood in action. So I think the more and more these guys come in throughout the weeks during the spring is going to be huge. It's going to pay off huge benefits going forward.
Cool. Hey, I know Justin had some notes. I don't want to make you speak for Justin, but the latest, this is a fan favorite, Booby Feaster. Everyone's bringing him up. The early thing was just like, don't hold your breath. But now he's talking about potentially rescheduling one of his OVs. I think he said it was going to be Miami, but Texas doesn't have a visiting date on the date that would be a Miami date for him. So I don't know what's going on there. Do we know anything with Booby Feaster? Is it worth our time?
Yeah, what could go wrong? It's a top wide receiver in the state. Texas dominates a top wide receiver in the state recruiting. Evan Stewart, DeCorian Moore, Micah Hudson. What else do you want to know?
Was Jonte the top receiver?
Feaster was the top when before he reclassified. They felt like he was the best talent in the state. So, it's worth paying attention to. Could it go sideways? Of course, it could go sideways. There, if they find two Lockets, if they find a Lockett and a French for what it would take to get a Feaster, they might go that direction again. I mean, it's you got to factor for economics, and it's kind of I don't really like talking about it, but nobody talked about this Nicholas Robertson commitment the other day. It had the least amount of reactions I think we've ever had for a commit in the history of Inside Texas. And we have like 10 times more subscribers than when I first got there. And I'm not even being hyperbolic here. The value of Nicholas Robertson, outside of the fact they want to be more robust at the point of attack in the run game, is that it's not going to cost a whole lot. And so if you really want to get John Turntine and Felix Ojo, well, you better get a guy like Nicholas Robertson first because that's going to allow you to go for broke. Now, Feaster, they're not going to break the bank for one wide receiver. They want to get 3 or 4 really good ones. So it's economics are going to matter. To say otherwise, we're kind of burying our head in the sands. We don't want to do that.
Awesome, man.
Feaster's a stud, and they want him for sure.
Well, and the portal market, right? Like, if you can get a #1 receiver for a reasonable price, but otherwise you just take the one and done guy, you Golden, AD Mitchell. There's not a ton of value right now in paying for the #1 receiver, hurting your depth when really you can just rent a guy for a year and get him where you need to be.
Correct.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
It's because we're used to the pancake factory. We got spoiled. I agree with both of these.
Kyle Flood, the reputation for Kyle Flood as a recruiter is one of the most misunderstood things in the entire program. If any other coach took a class like he took in 2023, you would say he was a terrible recruiter.
Yeah,
he's taken a lot of projects. It was funny last cycle. Everybody was like, Terry Joseph this, Terry Joseph that, while lauding Kyle Flood for having 4 guys commit or whatever it was at the time, 3.
Yeah.
He's taken a lot of mix and match guys on, as far as ability goes. They're longer curve guys. And I don't have a problem with the plan. I'm just saying that, the plan makes sense, especially with these economic considerations I was just talking about. But he is not – it's not like he's been lining up highly rated recruits left and right. He got a couple in 2022. He got 0 in 2023. He got 1 in 2024. And 2025 was who? None? Nick Brooks, I guess.
Brooks.
Yeah, Nick Brooks. That's it.
And Nick Brooks was barely a 4-star. So he's just he's stockpiling. I think it's a good plan. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like he's just killing it with 5 stars, high 4 stars left and right. Now this is the cycle where he has to do that, go big at offensive tackle to try to get some sure things.
That's what I'm saying, and I'm glad you mentioned the economic. Is that how it ends up being whenever you got to pay for an NFL tackle that's going to be 3 and done? Does that end up making you get depth guys at guard? Like, how does that work economically?
Well, a 3 and done tackle is entirely different depending on who it is. They got entirely more value out of Kelvin Banks than they got out of Cam Williams, right? I mean, they're not all created equal. So you really want – that's why we talked about Michael Fasusi. If he isn't going to start as a true freshman, man, then he gets more expensive on a per annum basis.
Yeah.
So, that's why in this cycle, getting a guy that's going to replace Trevor Gooseby, let's be honest, Trevor Gooseby is going to be gone after this season. A guy that could come in and play as a true freshman, potentially. Nick Brooks, I think, is going to play a lot as a second-year player. But you need a guy that can at least come in and compete to start. If they're just going to sit the bench for $1 million or whatever it is, that's not smart. That's not good accounting.
But also, here's the problem: like Kelvin Banks got 3 years, right? But Cam and Trevor will basically be one and dones. So it's like that's also kind of the frustrating part because you used to get like tackles for like at least 2, right? And they'd be in your program for 5 years. Now it's like you're paying for these tackles, man, and they're just one and doneing too. So it's like you're even getting less value for paying more money for less yearly value.
Right. But that's why their approach makes sense. The only thing that I think they should be doing more of is using the portal a little bit more often to get guys that are more journeyman starters. Rent them for 1 year because you've got a lot of time. It's not just money. You got time and resources wrapped into a guy, offensive lineman. Say it's 5 years and you get 1 season out of him. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make economic sense in these new times.
Yeah.
Hey man, I didn't know we were doing this, but we're being told need to stop sleeping on Chris Stewart. I do think some people are doing that though. I love Stewart.
Yeah.
Inside outside guy, reminds me of the Steve Smith that played at USC back in the day. Got drafted by the Giants, I believe, in the second round. Chris Stewart's a really good player. Love his play speed. Wish he had some track times. So if he would put out some really damn good track times, it would take some of the burden off my back to tell people that he's a good player.
Yeah, he had another solid showing at OT7 in Dallas again. I think he's one of the top 10 guys mentioned. Like in 3 weekends in a row, he's been mentioned. So he's out there doing well versus all the top talent.
Dude, these OT7s are getting crazy, dude. Like these big screens and like all this stuff, man.
I can't do 7-on-7 anymore, man.
It's getting crazy, dude. They're turning it into
too much N1 mixtape for me.
Dude, it's being turned into
There's a ton of that.
It's a whole product right now, dude.
The DJ's going nuts. I mean, yeah.
Dude, they got our boy Kieran on there.
Yeah, Kieran's out there.
Like, dude, it's crazy, man. Like, I get it, man. It's interesting, but man, I was just watching the clips and I was getting distracted by everything that was not occurring on the field. It's pretty wild. It's crazy, man. To see where 7-on-7's gone and over the years is nuts, man.
Hey,
I used to be an elite.
I got to talk about Jermaine Bishop out there wearing a cape and a mask. Yeah. He's out there locking people down. It didn't matter from slot outside, playing receiver. Like, that's a kid that needs a 5th star because he absolutely shut down and blanketed everyone.
I sent a note to On3. They don't really ask for our input on recruiting, which okay. And I'm like, what? Have you seen where you guys have Jermaine Bishop? And it's like in the hundreds in the state. And now you just got number 1 player at OT7. So maybe check them DMs on Slack a little bit.
Well, dude, you're talking to an elite 7-on-7 center. So I used to do some crazy work out there, dude. And
really, that's a demanding position in Southern.
Dude, it was crazy, man. Like the toughest part was like in between games going to eat at Chili's, dude. Like you had to have your mind right, dude. That's back then. Yeah, I used to love it, man, because it's a fun Saturday. Everybody take you out to Chili's. Our team was pretty good, but not the expectations of having to win. So you would just right there, man. It was a nice little Saturday, but it's crazy what it is now, dude. That's not what's occurring. It's turning into AAU basketball. All right. Any final thing, guys, on recruiting? Anything that you guys got? Any players that you thought maybe Texas wasn't in it for, but we won them over? Any of that kind of stuff?
I like the Richard Wesley guy that came in. I didn't really look at his. A lot of times I don't watch tape until the recruitment gets real enough for me to do so. There's no point in investing time. Then there's still a small part of me that gets his hopes up. But Wesley's a guy that reclassified, and it's astounding to me that he's supposed to be going into his junior year rather than senior year because he's already physically mature. He plays like a grown man. Maybe just a little bit of hesitance at times, but he looks like a guy that you would want to follow Lance Jackson at that Jack the bigger defensive end position for Texas. They got to be physically mature. Obviously, they wouldn't demand a whole lot of him right away because it's hard to get ahead of Lance. But that's a guy I want in the class because it makes sense as far as a developmental prospect right behind Lance Jackson as a guy that could be maybe not quite on Lance's level, but not far behind.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, for a reclassification, go watch this huddle.
He's not a Southern California, so I should throw that in there. So, who's your competition out in Southern California? USC to the people that are just kind of on autopilot when it comes to college football. Oh, I think I'm supposed to go to USC because I'm in Southern California.
Oregon.
You got Oregon, of course, but then after that, who's the quickest flight to big time football? It's a straight shot from Southern California to Austin.
Yeah.
And real football culture. If that's what you're looking for, when I went to high school in Southern California, there was so many different competing interests. You had the water polo players were getting the girls, but for those hardcore football players, they want a different environment. And when you can identify those guys, they're a lot easier to pull.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we know Southern California guys like Austin too, so it's an easy cultural transition as well.
They like it a little too well.
But it's not a huge psychological shift either. And you get football. All right, guys. Cool. That was fun. All right. Padded practice today. Eric will have some notes up soon.
I'm not sure when, but it's as long as it doesn't conflict with the Elite Eight game tonight, we'll post those notes. I'm just kidding.
All right. And we got Inside Texas Baseball coming out in a couple hours. And then we will also have the reheat this evening for you guys. So stay tuned, guys. A lot of good stuff coming out on the channel. And this was brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Have a great day, y'all. Peace.